There are moments in life when we ignore warnings, thinking we know best, until fate forces us to listen. I should have paid attention. If I had, maybe things would have been different. But in the end, one thing saved me.
The house buzzed with excitement as the children, Adana, Chidi, and Kemi, ran around, eager for our annual Christmas trip to the village. Ada, my wife, packed our bags with care, making sure we had everything. But her focus wasn't just on clothes and food. She insisted we should pray before we leave. I waved her off, chuckling. Ada, God knows we're traveling. He doesn't need a reminder. She looked at me, concern in her eyes, but didn't press further. The children, unaware of my dismissive attitude, played with excitement. Little did I know that this small act of ignoring Ada's request would be the first of many mistakes I would make on this journey. One evening, while driving home, I saw an old woman by the roadside. Her back was hunched and her eyes seemed far older than her years. I stopped and offered to help. As she climbed into my car, she spoke calmly. Do not travel this Christmas. If you must go, pray and fast. There is danger ahead. I laughed, trying to ease the tension. Old woman, don't be silly. I've made this trip every year without a problem. We'll be fine. Her eyes locked onto mine and she said softly, you won't be fine unless you listen. I brushed off her warning. There was no way something could go wrong on this journey. It was the morning of our departure, and Ada tried one last time. Let's pray before we leave, she suggested. I was already running late, so I dismissed her. We don't have time for that, I said. But as I turned the key in the ignition, nothing happened. I tried again. Nothing. Frustrated, I popped the hood, but the engine was silent. Ada, calm as ever, said softly, maybe God doesn't want us to go. I was annoyed and called the mechanic. A few minutes later, he delivered the bad news. Olga, the engine is knocked. My face flushed. Ada looked at me, her expression unchanged, as if she'd known something I hadn't. Still, I was determined to go. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of the signs I had ignored. Meanwhile, in the village, Mama Oji, my stepmother, was furious. Every year John comes with his family, showing off his wealth, she muttered to herself, sitting in the darkened room. Her jealousy consumed her thoughts. Together with her friend Mama Amaka, they made their way to the village witches. In their secret meeting, the witch leader, her face twisted by years of anger and curses, leaned forward. They will not make it to the village alive, she promised. The other witches cackled in agreement. My stepmother's bitterness and the witch's spell were about to come to fruition. But at that moment, I had no idea what was brewing against me. With the car out of commission, I decided we'd take a commercial bus instead. As we boarded, Ada stood up to pray for our safety. She was loud enough that the other passengers heard. I groaned in frustration, embarrassed. Must you do this here, Ada? I hissed, but Ada, undeterred, began her prayer. Lord, protect us as we travel. Some passengers looked up, nodding politely, while others exchanged glances. I rolled my eyes. Don't embarrass me, I muttered under my breath. She continued regardless, asking for God's guidance on our journey. I didn't think we needed it. Little did I know this prayer would be what protected us in the coming hours. The bus was crowded with families, travelers, and the sound of children chattering excitedly. Adana, Chidi, and Kemi were already talking about their plans for the village. Ada sat beside me, holding my hand, offering me a calm I didn't realize I needed. The road stretched out before us as the bus hummed along. I leaned back in my seat, closed my eyes, and allowed myself to relax. For the first time that morning, I felt at peace. But peace, it turned out, would be fleeting. The journey had only just begun, and the dangers ahead were waiting. Without warning, the calm was shattered by the driver's panicked shout, "The brakes, they're not working!" The bus swerved violently, tossing passengers from their seats. I grabbed Ada's hand as the bus careened dangerously toward an oncoming tanker. Panic spread through the bus, passengers screamed in terror. I could feel my heart race as the truck loomed larger. Through the chaos, Ada's voice cut through. "Lord, save us! I shut my eyes, bracing for the impact. And then, crash! The sound of metal grinding against metal, the twisting of the bus, and then, nothing. Silence followed the crash, broken only by the sound of sirens approaching. I opened my eyes slowly, my head spinning. Rescue workers were pulling us from the wreckage. Ada and the children miraculously were unharmed, no cuts, no bruises. I looked down and felt my heart drop. My legs were gone, crushed beneath the wreckage, but Ada, holding my hand, whispered softly, "Thank God you're alive." I was alive, but I was shattered in a way I could never have imagined. The crash had stolen my body, but it had not taken my life, and that, I now realized, was a miracle. I was lying in the hospital bed, my body wrapped in bandages and casts, when she walked in. The old woman, she stood at the foot of my bed, her eyes steady, her presence commanding the room. "I warned you," she said softly. "Your wife's prayer saved you. Your stepmother, Mama Oji, and the witches planned this. But God is greater." My mind raced. My stepmother? The witches? It was too much to process, but in that moment, I understood. The warnings I'd ignored had led to this moment. But Ada's prayers had protected me, even when I couldn't see it. Tears welled up in my eyes as the truth hit me. Years had passed since that fateful Christmas accident. The days had softened the memory of that terrifying journey, but the lessons it left were etched in my heart forever. Mama Oji, my stepmother, had passed away. Her bitterness, her jealousy had faded with her. The village, once a place of rivalry and pride for me, no longer held the same weight. I returned to the village, but this time, I wasn't the proud man I once was. I was a man humbled by grace, aware that my survival wasn't by my own strength, but through the prayers of my wife, the mercy of God, and the lessons I had learned along the way. I walked through the familiar paths, not with a sense of entitlement, but with gratitude.
I was that man. I ignored every sign, every warning, until it was too late. But in the end, one thing saved me, my wife's prayers. And now, I share my story so that someone out there will not make the same mistake. If you've learned something from my story, share it with others. And never forget, prayer changes everything.